Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the first of a series of interviews on the Resilient Islands project. Thank you so much for joining us. We are indeed happy to have you. My
Resilient
name
Islands project. Thank you
is
so much for
Professor
joining
da
us. We
Silva.
are indeed happy to have you. My name Islands project. Thank you so much for joining us. We are indeed happy to have you. My name Islands project. Thank you so much for joining us. We are indeed
And I am just going to ask our guests to mute their mic just for a second.
I am just going to ask our guests to mute their mic just for a second. I am just going to ask our guests to mute their mic for a second.
All right, so we're having some feedback there. All right, so good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I am Provisa da Silva, Communications Officer with the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies here in the Caribbean. And joining me this afternoon, we have Mrs. Velda Ferguson Dewsbury. She is a project manager with the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, IFRC. And we also have Mr. Eddie Silva, who is also a project manager, but with the Nature Conservancy, TNC. Thank you so much for joining us, Eddie and Velda. So, we're going to be talking about the Resilient Islands project, and this is actually the first in a series of live interviews that we'll be having. So, today you'll learn a bit more about the project. We'll give you an introduction, a bit behind the scenes about it, what it is about, why do we have this project, and which countries are involved. All right. So, we're going to start off with Velda. Velda, can you tell us? We've been hearing so much about the Resilient Islands project. Can you please tell us what exactly is it about?
Sure. Hi. In a nutshell, the Resilience Islands Project is a 4-year initiative designed to protect islands against the impacts of climate change by promoting the use of coastal habitats to reduce risks and by helping governments, partners, and communities to implement sustainable development plans that prioritize nature.
Sounds exciting, Velda. Thank you so much. And Eddie, we know that this is actually a partnership between the IFRC and the TNC, but IFRC, TNC, they're such two different organizations. Can you tell us why would they have decided to partner on an initiative like this?
Sure, Travisa, and thank you for inviting me to this session. It's really exciting to talk about the Resilient Islands project. Well, as you said, the Resilient Islands is really about a partnership between the Nature Conservancy, which is the largest conservation organization in the world, and the International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, the world's largest humanitarian network. A major challenge in the Caribbean and many other regions is understanding that climate change adaptation is urgently needed to reduce hazards and build more resilience by protecting natural systems. And when I'm talking about natural systems, I'm talking about mangroves, forests, rivers, etc. So planning climate resilience with nature in mind and from the beginning is a key element for the solution of this global problem. And that's what inspired our partnership. So it was appropriate to have these two organizations coming together and combine both nature and people, science and people to reconsider community resilience and implement nature-based solutions that will protect the most vulnerable groups to the impacts of climate change. Thanks.
Amazing. And I love the concept of bringing together nature and people to tackle the issue of climate change. Velda, a project like this, though, must require a substantial amount of funding. Can you tell us who are the donors or supporters of this project?
Yes, sure. Teresa, you're correct. It does require a lot of funding. And this Resilience Islands project is actually just one of several global projects that is part of the what we call the ICI initiative, which is the International Climate Initiative. And it is funded through the Federal Ministry of Environment, Nature and Conservation and Nuclear Safety of the German government. And this is supported by an adoption that happened by German Bundestag. So we're basically funded through the German government using this initiative.
And of course, we thank the German government for their wonderful donation, which is helping to do so much here in the Caribbean. So, Eddie, we know that the Resilient Islands project is over a 4 year period. Can you tell us what is the main objective or the main outcome of this initiative?
Well, the Resilient Islands combines the best available science and knowledge about conservation and nature-based adaptation with the world's leading expertise in disaster response to develop tools and especially test solutions that use nature to protect communities and livelihoods. In addition to this development of tools, our work also centers around site interventions in communities, policy advocacy, resource mobilization, and partnership building. Resilient Islands' ultimate outcome is that governments and communities in the Caribbean adopt, embrace, and invest in nature-based solutions to reduce vulnerabilities and boost their adaptive capacities. Thanks.
So much in this project to be done, right? And I know that we have been doing so much already over the past few years that the project has been in existence. And we are actually very excited to hear more about this project. In fact, as I mentioned, this is the first in a series of lives. So you'll be able to hear much more about what is being done in the different countries that were actually selected. And speaking of countries, Velda, can you tell us which countries were selected and why were they specifically selected? I understand that you refer to them as geographies. So can you tell us a bit more about them?
Yes, we do fondly refer to them as geographies. And as you may know, the Caribbean region consists of several small island developing states and is among the world's most vulnerable to the impact of climate change. Therefore, through the Resilience Islands Project, TNC and IFRC has the opportunity to work with three countries in the region, and these are Jamaica, Dominican Republic, and Grenada, alongside with the Red Cross national societies within these three countries. These geographies were chosen because of their unique vulnerabilities and the National Red Cross societies present within them, their capacities to work with select coastal communities to identify and address these vulnerabilities.
Sounds amazing. And we know that the Jamaica Red Cross, the Grenada Red Cross, and the Dominican Republic Red Cross have all been doing an amazing job at, implementing some of these activities in their communities. I've personally been able to go out with the Jamaica Red Cross team here in Jamaica to the community Old Arbor Bay, and I am just amazed at how the community members are pretty much very receptive to the project. They're very receptive to the activities, and they are engaged as well. They're fully engaged in the process, and you can see that they've owned the project and its activities. So we can't wait to hear much more about some of these. All the amazing activities that's happening in the specific countries that have been selected. Now, Eddie, one of the buzzwords that we keep hearing, or the buzz phrases that we keep hearing about, is nature based solutions, right? And we understand that this is actually a key component of the Resilient Islands project. Can you tell us more about these?
Yes, what are nature-based solutions? Nature-based solutions are activities, actions to protect, manage, and restore natural systems to tackle economic, social, and environmental problems, environmental challenges, such as, for instance, climate change. This, in the case we're talking about. Nature-based solutions are deeply linked to community empowerment and leadership, as well as community stewardship, and especially the sustainable management practices to maintain and strengthen these natural systems, to strengthen nature, which is really essential for climate adaptation. Some examples of nature-based solutions include, for example, protecting and restoring coral reefs that provide extensive protection against natural hazards such as floodings by reducing wave energy. And coral reefs not only provide an effective first line of defense against hazards, but also supply a source of income, livelihoods for coastal communities, and these benefits are essential for people. Another nature-based solution is restoring and protecting mangrove trees, which help reduce coastal erosion and flooding and provide shelter and nursery grounds for a diversity of marine life, especially commercial fish species. And so through the Resilient Islands project, we are working together with communities to design and implement nature-based solutions combined with community-based adaptation measures so they can secure sources of livelihoods, and also communities can be ready to respond to any kind of emergent hazard. Thanks.
I love how it talks about engaging the community as well in doing these actually, using these nature-based solutions. And I remember recently here in Jamaica, we had a fisher folk who went, or a fisherman went and with the Red Cross team and actually started planting some mangroves. So that is a clear example of nature-based solutions, right? In terms of using whatever resources you have available to build back the natural resources of the environment. And I love that, of course, we're involving the people who it affects the most, because climate change affects the different levels of community members. But I love the fact that they're not just looking at themselves as a victim, but also engaging with the Red Cross and the TNC in using these nature-based solutions to help build more resilience. So that's a very, very good approach. Can you tell us, though, Veldo, another key aspect as we speak of resilience, another key aspect of the Resilient Islands project? We've heard about the roadmap to resilience. Can you tell us more about what this entails?
Sure. The roadmap to resilience is just one of many tools developed by the IFRC that we're using in this process, in this project, sorry. And as the name suggests, it is a step-by-step guide to provide national societies with instructions or guidance on how to support communities on their journey to building resilience. It basically outlines the steps that should be undertaken to move from one stage, which in most cases is low or lack of resilience, to having developed resilience to climate events. And it consists of 4 stages, and in each stage, there are several steps. So, stage 1 deals with engaging and connecting. So, this tells the national societies how they can engage and connect with the communities. And then stage 2 deals with understanding the risks and looking at components of resilience. So it helps this step helps them to now work with the community to see what risks they have present and what is required for resilience. Stage 3 takes us into the action stage, and this stage is rightly called taking action for resilience. And it outlines a series of guidelines that should be undertaken to now take action to build resilience. And step 4 deals with like all good projects, it looks at review. So it basically takes you through a stage called learning. And in each stage, there are certain milestones that you need to reach or aim for. And this allows you to be able to gauge your progress as you move from one stage to the next and move from step to step. I really wish that you could have seen a graphic of this tool because it's a very interactive tool that actually has footsteps and provides interesting guidance for the communities. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we actually do have the Roadmap to Resilience available on the IFRC website, ifrc.org, right, Feldo? So persons can actually go up over to the website and view the entire stages of the Roadmap to Resilience. And there's also a guide as well. And one of the things that I know we hadn't talked about this before, but they all of these steps must have to be recorded, right? At some point, the the different stages and the different processes of the roadmap to resilience and how the national societies are working with the community members and the TNC to carry out these activities, they have to be recorded. Can you tell us a bit more about how exactly this process is being recorded so that they can continue, learning from what they have done and look at best practices and so forth?
Some of them are recorded through the use of different tools. So while this is a tool in itself, it allows for the integration of some of our other tools that we usually utilize in community engagement, and particularly in this type of work where we do resilience and working within communities. So it allows the national society or whoever is working within the communities, because sometimes we're working with partners, so like TNC for this example, for this project, sorry, and we document, and in the learning stage is where you actually review a lot of what was documented and look at what needs to be adjusted. So sometimes when we get to that stage, we may have to go back to do corrective actions in some of the other stages and then start again and continue along the road. So while it's a map, is basically like if you're utilizing a GPS, sometimes you do need to, if you move off the path, with a GPS, when it gives you a certain path, and once you deviate from it, it begins redirecting or reprogramming to get you back on track to where you want to go. So this has a similar concept in it, built into it, so we can actually look at all of the things that were recorded and then take steps to move back onto the path to building resilience.
Awesome, awesome indeed. And we see a comment. Someone in the chat is asking. We have Keisha Sandy, who is asking how many communities in the RI project have completed the roadmap to resilience. Do we have that number as yet?
Within this project, we're working with 3 communities, and all of them are utilizing some stage of this, but 2 of them have utilized this roadmap to resilience in detail. And that is because the community in Grenada, their project was based on a previous project that they would have implemented. So they had a baseline previously, but the community in Jamaica and in Dominican Republic applied this roadmap.
Okay, awesome. And one of the things that we wanted to also look at, and Eddie, this question is for you. We've heard about nature-based solutions, but one of the other buzz phrases that we always hear about is disaster risk reduction. In fact, only on October 13th, we observed International Disaster Risk Reduction Day. Can you tell us more about disaster risk reduction and how exactly does the RI project help with that?
Sure. With disaster risk reduction, what we want is to decrease the damage produced by natural hazards. I mean, earthquakes, floods, hurricanes, for instance. Disaster risk reduction is really about decisions, and these decisions we make every day determine how severely communities are affected by natural hazards. The better prepared a community is for natural hazards, the less likely is that a hazard will turn into a disaster. This is where the Resilient Islands project kicks in by integrating ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction, such as planting mangroves to ensure that communities reduce their exposures to floods, to hazards, and also to identifying and reducing their vulnerabilities, and concurrently developing skills, capacities to prepare for and respond for emergencies. This is how communities build resilience with nature. Thanks.
That's awesome. And I know that the different activities that are being done in the RI project, of course, will eventually lead to helping to reduce the impact of disasters, because there is a saying that there are no natural disasters, right? It's just the ability of a community, the ability of a country to handle, and what capacity do they have to handle a hazard. And that is what determines whether it's a disaster or not. So the more we can engage our communities and get them to be prepared, is the less likely, the less likelihood of a hazard actually becoming a disaster. So this is something again that we take, very a lot of pride in ensuring that we encourage disaster risk reduction methods. So thank you so much, Eddie, for explaining that. No, I know this project has been going on for a while. We're in the third year, going into the fourth year. Is that
Fourth
correct?
year, actually.
Fourth year. We're in the fourth year. So there must have been so many lessons that you would have learned so far. Can each of you share with us what's one lesson that you have learned from the Resilient Islands project?
You want to start, Belda?
Sure. As an organization, Resilience Islands has allowed, because we're a humanitarian organization, this partnership with TNC has definitely allowed us to be able to what we call green some of our tools. So, for example, the Roadmap to Resilience is a perfect example of one of the tools that we've been able to add or revise to take into consideration things like nature-based solutions and some addition of some of the techniques that we would have learned through this particular project that we can now apply going forward to all of the communities that we're working in to build resilience. We have some other tools that we've developed through this project. So definitely for us as an organization, one of the lessons we've learned is in terms of tool development.
Yes, and I can complement with lessons. Let's remember that Resilient Islands is somehow it's turned into a model that is providing an approach that in the future probably other at-risk coastal communities can use to protect themselves against the impacts of climate change. One of the lessons learned is that when you establish partnerships, joint ventures such as the one, the two organizations, the Nature Conservancy and the International Federation of the Red Cross, you are in some ways building this approach, this model. And this model, how you build it, is based on these experiences, the combination of tools, the combination of strategies to engage communities, to engage governments, to put together brilliant minds and people who's passionate and devoted, not only to protect nature, but to save lives. So the best lesson learned I take for this is that we are using nature-based solutions, we're using conservation to protect livelihoods and especially to save lives. And this partnership is invaluable in that sense.
Both perfectly said, and I think you've all wrapped up pretty much some of the key lessons that we have learned about the RI project. But I'm seeing a question coming in the chat based on so many lessons that we have learned in this project. Are there plans to replicate this initiative or to upscale it in any way?
Um, Elements of this project have or are being replicated through other projects. Currently, in terms of being replicated under the same type of name, we're working with TNC in Bahamas, as well as the Bahamas Red Cross, uh, forming a partnership to continue the work that we've done through this project under their own version of Resilience Islands. We also have elements of this project being replicated in other projects that we're undertaking right now, even though we are not partnering with TNC on those particular initiatives through projects like the Community Resilience Building Project. Elements that we've learned under this project or tools that we've developed, such as our CAN checklist, has been replicated by the countries under that particular project. But in terms of being replicated, almost similar to this, the project in the Bahamas, which is now being called the Bahamas Resilience Islands Project or Resilience Islands Bahamas. Yes, is the yes.
Yes, and I just like to add that also in Haiti, we are taking some, steps, developing steps also to bring the resilient islands. As you said, Belda, not necessarily replicate the entire model because that takes a long time. Is actually a process, and that's another lesson we learn is
Yes.
that each country has their local context and experiences and culture, and so we need to learn that process in order to adapt and adopt the tools and the methodologies and approaches to make it more effective for each geography. So these are I would say emerging steps in Haiti, and probably in the future even beyond the Caribbean, but that's something that needs more work, more efforts.
And Eddie, maybe if we get some more funding, we will continue our partnership with these two teams in other countries beyond the three that we
Sure.
have once we can secure that funding.
Sure. And when you talk about scale up, it's very important. And when I talk about this holistic approach, is that we're not only touching base on community engagement or testing the tools or projects on the ground. As I said, we have also policy advocacy. And policy is really important because we're working at the national level, and we want this to influence, legislation, influence policymakers to make decisions about investing in nature, investing in disaster risk reduction. And that's very important because as you combine all these recommendations at the national level, then these examples can be used at the regional and global level. So that's really about scaling
Yes.
up.
Yes, and that's a very valid point about the behind the scenes work. Too often we talk about what's happening on the ground, which is very good, and actually having those actions being taken by community members is also good. But then there is a lot of work that's happening behind the scenes in terms of, as you mentioned, Eddie, the policy and the advocacy. But all of this requires, as you rightly said, additional funding. And I'm seeing a comment where it says that we need more donors willing to take a chance on non traditional partnerships to get successes. And I think that pretty much sums up what it takes. So it's a partnership, with the donors. It's a partnership with the legislative a network. It's a partnership with government. It's a partnership with the communities. And so at the end of the day, I think that's what RI is all about. It's about partnership. It's about ensuring that we bring all the necessary stakeholders on board to see how we can help to build resilient communities. So now it's Jamaica, Grenada, Dominican Republic. But we would love to see this, the same principle, the same processes being replicated in other countries in the Caribbean and even outside of the Caribbean. But of course, we need the support for this to happen. I'm seeing where we have another question. Will the TNC and the IFRC collaborate on future projects that meld environment with disaster risk reduction?
Sure, sure, definitely. As you said, we want to keep this partnership. We have developed a resource mobilization plan in order to mobilize resources, public and private funds that are going to help us implement these solutions, this portfolio, these projects of solutions in the three geographies, but beyond there. And perhaps not only focus on disaster risk reduction, but perhaps it could be green recovery, sustainable development, and other components that in many ways secure resilience for communities, for vulnerable communities.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And we're seeing a comment in the chat from Samantha Dixon. Samantha is actually from Grenada, and she's saying that she's a
Yes.
popular advocate. Thank you so much, Samantha. And of course, for the amazing work that's been done in Grenada and all the other countries, Jamaica, Dominican Republic, and Velda mentioned that Bahamas has now joined the Resilient Islands stream under another project, but similar principles, similar processes. All right, so we want to know though. Well, I'm seeing another question before I go to my final question, and it's asking if RI has addressed or influenced national or regional policy. are you able to say as yet whether some of the behind the scenes work that you're doing in terms of legislation and policies, has there been any any legwork? Have you started seeing any results as yet?
Well, we're working on that. I guess working with policy, it's also really about working with behaviors and understanding knowledge, attitudes, perceptions of people, of decision makers, of government agencies, of communities. So that's a process. I think we are on the way. We have advanced with producing important reports that are recommending where the gaps are and the opportunities to influence in many ways policy and legislation in these countries. This is really about changing behaviors. This is really about changing minds, and that takes time. That's a process, and that's the reason why when we talk about mobilizing resources, we are talking not only about this portfolio of projects, but actually how we can influence in changes in legislation, in policies in the countries, and hopefully in the region in the future. And that also comes with partnerships, SEDIMA, CARICOM, and other regional partners that can help us in the future elevate our voices, speak up for disaster risk reduction and nature-based adaptation.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Eddie. And Velda, we've looked at what the RI project has done so far, but what happens when the project is actually completed?
This project is very much centered around building community resilience and encouraging sustainability. So, therefore, we are hoping that the communities that we are working with will be empowered to continue the practices and activities that we have been implementing under this project, even after it ends. And also, a key component of this project was provided training for communities, persons within communities. So we're hoping that the persons that we would have trained will now go out and train others, and that they will start what we call be a mini movement within their communities and maybe within their nation, their countries. So basically, we're really hoping that the our investment into these three countries would lead to a movement that will build the resilience in the countries and eventually even a development of a resilience action plan. Additionally, through our policy component, we're also hoping that we would have created some type of advocacy so that national policies could be changed and therefore resilience will be given bigger consideration, even in terms of financial consideration when governments are planning their work plans every year.
Sounds good. And we really hope that, all the different successes, all the different lessons learned from this project, we can continue to see the benefits. And I believe that we will, because the community members, as I've said, at least for the ones that I've seen, are very excited about the project. They're very excited about the promise that it brings and what they've already seen happening. And so I believe that no doubt they will continue to carry on the legacy of the Resilient Islands project. All right. So thank you so much, Velda and Eddie, for joining us, for taking part in this discussion, and for giving us so much information about this amazing project here in the Caribbean. We also want to thank those of you who have joined us, especially those who sent comments and questions in the chat. And also, please, if you need more information on the project, you can go to the IFRC website at www.ifrc.org, or you can go to the TNC website at www.nature.org. You can also follow both organizations on social media. So for the TNC, they are on Twitter as nature_org, and they are on Facebook as the Nature Conservancy. And of course, we have also the nature_Caribbean on Instagram. And for IFRC, you can follow the IFRC on all platforms, or literally on all platforms, including TikTok. And we also have the IFRC Americas pages that you can follow on Instagram and Twitter, which is IFRC_ES. And finally, you can also follow the CADRIM page, which is Caribbean Disaster Risk Management. And we're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. So thank you so much again for joining us. Of course, please stay tuned for more lives. You can stay tuned to this page on the IFRC America's YouTube channel, and we'll also be sharing some podcasts with you about these lives. So we'll be recording the audio and sharing it with you on our podcast on the IFRC Red Hearts podcast channel. So we have so many different ways to reach you. Please continue to stay in touch. And as I said, this is the first in a series of lives. So we have so much more to share with you. Thank you again for joining us. And remember that together, people and nature can work to build community resilience and reduce the impact of climate change. Thank you again for having us and have a pleasant afternoon.